Clearly, they are also in my life. Nothing is more important than peace. Please join me for a couple of moments in silence as a tribute to the suffering and dying people in Ukraine and as a clear signal to stop that war. Thank you very much. All right, a very warm welcome from my side. And after fixing some sound issues in the first seconds of this webinar and summit, I welcome everybody to today's Climate Action Global Summit 2022, to which we have worked very hard in the last couple of months. The great team of the European Technology Chamber, who is hosting this event together with partners, our partners like UNFCCC, Prime Computer, and Google Now. Before we kick it off, I would like to quickly introduce EUTech to you, led by our chairman, Florian von Tucher, who is also the chair of the MNP Group and the Tucher Group. The European Technology Chamber is a platform and a network targeted towards companies and building a platform for sharing insights, knowledge, and making each other company even more successful for their typically sustainable business models. EUTech offers state-of-the-art fairs, digital and real-world events, as well as interesting content, I think, and hopefully we can prove that today. We are structured in 25 alliances in very different topics. One of them is the Climate Action Alliance, and I have the honor to be the chair of this Climate Action Alliance, which is hosting this event today. And we have set up an event. I am brave to say right now, we have 10 great speakers. We have very interesting keynotes. We have more than 200 companies in the exposition. And by having said that, I'm happy to hand over to the host of this event, Ms. Maria Alejandra Pulido, who will introduce to us now the agenda and the structure of the day. Enjoy and have fun. Maria, it's yours.
Thank you, Jörg. Thank you so much for those introduction words about UTech, about who we are and what we do. I believe that today is a very important day because we're going to be hosting a very important summit about a topic that is quite important in what is happening in today's world. So good morning all that are watching us. My name is Maria Alejandra Pulido and I am the Environment Council and Latin American Alliance Director. And on behalf of the European Technology Chamber and the Climate Action Alliance, I would like to welcome you all to today's Digital Climate Action Summit and Expo. Time is running out and we need to act now. We believe that this decade must be the decade of credible climate action. The European Technology Chamber, together with the Climate Action Alliance, Go Blue Now, Prime Computers, United Nations Climate Change Initiative, and CDP invite you for today's Climate Action Summit and Expo. We prepared for you today a rich agenda, including pressing climate action topics, ideas, solutions related to the effective CO2 reduction, but as well the transformation of the energy system, the circular economy, the credibility in climate action, stakeholder management, and the green funding, as well as world-class speakers and experts. We believe this event aims to promote the practical cooperation and exchange that puts impactful action, as well as encourage open discussions and communication through the team forums, online exhibitions, and matchmaking meetings. Let me now present our agenda with 10 world-class keynote speakers and great panel sessions. Our presentations and speakers will be here in the main room from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. CEST, okay? And every 20 minutes, we will have a different topic related with the climate action. After every speech, we will invite you to breakout rooms to follow this discussion with the speakers and panelists in charge of that specific topic. Under the screen, you can find the main room agenda with all the keynote speakers and both slides, both sides of the screen. You will find the direct links to go to the panel rooms, to the separate rooms, in which you're going to have the possibility to talk with those guests and go into a deep dive into those topics. Now, I would like to present you our today's for the speakers. Here are the speakers and topics for the block 1, effective CO2 reduction. How will we actually reach net zero? First, we're going to have Paula Huerta. She's the founder of Bamboo Studio, and she's going to be talking about circular economy in architecture. Then we're going to have Professor Hanjo Alainer. He's the managing director of CAP2, and he's going to be talking about our net zero emission by 2050 is still possible. Then we're going to have block 2 that is going to be about technology and operations solutions to the climate crisis. In here, we're honored with the presence of Oliver Warkick. He's the group leader at Fraunhofer IOSB. And he's going to be talking about a blueprint for transforming the energy system. After him, we're going to have Sasha Lilion. He's the CEO and Prime Computer. And he's going to be talking about how circular electronic changes the way that we consume. After that, we're going to have the block 3, in which we're going to be talking about the credibility in climate action, what to do to stop the greenwashing. In here, we're going to have the presence of 2 speakers. The first one will be Jörg Token. He's the CEO of Go Blue Now and the chairman of the Climate Action Alliance here in UTech. And he's going to be talking about the credible climate action for SMEs from the plan to action. Then we're going to have Alexandra Leibert. She's a lecturer at ODIS, and she's going to be speaking about how to educate and to identify greenwashing. After that, we're going to have block 4. And this block is about the effective stakeholders management, creating the right sustainable ecosystem. In here, we're going to have first at Ikmat Renshoek. He is the CEO and founder of We Don't Have Time. And he's going to be talking about what is the role of the stakeholders in saving the environment. After him, we're going to have Rainer Monet. He's the company owner of the Value Balance Institute, and he's going to be talking about which sustainable values should be taken into accounting and value balance. After this block, we're going to have block number 5. And this block is about green funds and finance, pushing money into the right direction and making sustainability affordable. First, we're going to have Ian Robertson. He's the Executive Director of Investors EMEA, and he's going to be talking about the solutions and the innovations for the climate protection, where to find the funds. After him, we're going to have Martin Hiller, and he's the founding partner and the director of the Millwater Partners. He's going to be talking about how the investment funds can drive the green transition. I hope that you didn't get lost with this brief description of our agenda, but don't worry, because I'm going to be here guiding you before each block. As I said before, under the screen, you can find the main room agenda with all the keynote speakers, and in both sides of the screen, you will find the breakout sessions with the speakers and panelists. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Miguel Naranjo, who is a program officer in the United Nations Climate Action Secretariat, who will introduce us and tell us more about the UN Climate Neutral Now initiative. Miguel, the microphone is yours.
Thank you very much, Alejandra, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invitation today, and let me share my screen very quickly. So I'm honored for the invitation to be able to join with you today. So I want to thank the organizers. And the topic of my presentation is very concrete and quite short, and it's an invitation for all of you to consider joining the Climate Neutral Now initiative of the UNFCCC Secretariat, also known as the UN Climate Change Secretariat. I know I don't need to tell you this, because if you're attending this summit, you know about the topic, you're aware about the topic, but I just wanted to underline that action on climate is good for business, right? The reason to take action on climate is not just because it's the morally correct thing to do. It is a business need. If you want your business to be able to continue operating into the future, we need to address climate change. So there is a clear business case for action on climate. Now, how does Climate Neutral Now help? Basically, we can provide support for you to start going through the process of addressing your greenhouse gas emissions, and to provide recognition for those efforts that you will start or are already implementing. So Climate Neutral Now is basically a support and recognition initiative where you sign a commitment to follow the process that you can see in this slide. You estimate your carbon footprint, you define and implement actions to reduce it, and then optionally you can decide to contribute, which in this case, or to make an additional contribution, which in this case it means compensation, offsetting of unavoided emissions. And then you report on your actions every year. So measure, reduce, and optionally contribute, and report every year. Based on your report, which we will assess, and depending on the level of completeness and robustness of the actions that you have reported, then you will be assigned a level of achievement, which you can see in the slide. No need to focus too much on this right now, and I won't explain it in detail. But the idea of the different levels is to allow small organizations that may not have the resources to do third-party verification of footprints, full scope 3 calculations, to still be able to participate and receive recognition and encouragement to act, while inviting or encouraging those that have the resources to do more and to do better. Participants in the initiative currently are around 700 of them, all the way from small SMEs and schools to the big transnationals, some of which you see in this slide. The benefit of participating, again, in addition to the support that we may provide you to go through the process of measuring, reducing, compensating optionally, is the brand value that it could bring to you by associating yourselves with a United Nations-led initiative. So you can use the logo of the initiative, your company's name goes into our list of participants, and we can support in communications around your actions on climate. So hopefully it's a win-win situation. We advance climate action and you receive some support and some recognition for your actions. And that's it from my side. I hope I did it within my 3 minutes. And back to you, Alejandra.
You did it. Thank you, Miguel.
Excellent.
Thank you very much for everything that you have been sharing with us. I believe that it's a great initiative and it's important to understand how we can get involved, how we can join forces. So I invite all the attendees not only to get in touch with you, but as well with Marcin Kiel, that is the director of the Climate Alliance here in UTEC. We will be happy to guide you into this path. So thank you so much, Miguel, for that. Now, let's give a big welcome to our next speaker, that is Paula Huerta. She is the founder of the Bamboo Studio. She's an amazing architect and she has an amazing approach to sustainability and circular economy. She will be extremely excited in presenting the next topic regarding circular economy in architecture. So now I would like to give her the microphone. And Paula, please give us a deep dive into this.
Hello, can everybody hear me? I'm gonna turn on my screen. Hi, how are you?
We are good, thank you, Paula.
So I believe I have some issues sharing my screen, but Marcin should have my presentation ready. So Marcin, if you can share it, because I cannot do it, I get some little error. I'm in Indonesia right now, so while Marcin shares the screen, okay, I can see it now.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. So welcome everybody today in these crazy weeks that we have right now here. We had to postpone this summit due to the pandemic, and now we are doing it finally in the midst of a crazy war. So I think times are changing very fast. Today we're going to talk a little bit about circular economy and sustainable architecture. I would like to introduce myself first. So if you can go to the second slide. My name is Paula Huerta. I am a licensed architect and I am specialized in sustainable architecture and net zero and green certifications and all of that. But lately, since like 4 or 5 years ago, I became an ambassador for circular economy. And right now I'm currently working a lot in circular food systems. If you're passionate about sustainability, there is so much you can do. So I want to walk you through a lot of different things that are happening that are key, not the only ones, but key to achieve decarbonization by 2030 if we want to. So we cannot ignore them. Next slide, please. So a lot of us, we are always talking about saving the planet, but we all know that the planet is not at risks. At the moment, there's been already 5 mass extinctions. Right now, we are entering the 6th one. So we are truly believers that the planet will recover and life will recover. So it's not something that we will destroy the whole thing. So when we talk about saving the planet, we're really talking about our survival in the planet, what we understand as the current life. So now to give you a little bit of an introduction, where are we now? If you can go to the next slide, Marcin, please. I met actually Jeremy Rifkin in a boot camp of circular economy a few years ago, and he talked about his book, The Third Industrial Revolution, and it's really interesting to read it to see where are we now. What he's explaining is that humankind went through some industrial revolutions, and to define an industrial revolution, there's always 3 technologies that emerged in parallel. So there is always a new communication technology happening together with a new energy source, together with a new way of transportation. So the 19th century in the UK with coal as new energy supply. Then we had the telegram and industrial printing press, which led new forms of communication. And then obviously the steam engine and the railway started thanks to that new energy, the coal. So that was a new transport. In the 20th century in the US, we had oil as the new energy source, and that came with combustion engines and cars, and then centralized phone and centralized electricity. That was the second industrial revolution. The third industrial revolution, we are entering it now. We've already changed all of our communications, right? In the past 10 years with internet. We're now entering to the Internet of Things, no? Connecting ourselves to things through the internet. We have new energy sources, renewables, and then we have new transportation systems that are being developed right now, like driverless cars and drones, etc. What we didn't have in the 20th century revolution, the second industrial revolution of the first, was the environmental crisis. We are at the dawn of those two industrial revolutions. They were heavily fossil fueled. So right now our problem is that we are facing an environmental crisis created by those industrial revolutions. And that can jeopardize the third industrial revolution. If we go to the next slide, please, Marcin, we can see how linked overpopulation, we have tripled our population in the past 100 years. When Kennedy died, we were half the population as we are now. It's not a joke. The more people there is in this planet, the more pressure we put to the resources. But you can see here in this couple of graphs how the carbon emissions went exponential, but it's the same graph as population and the same graph as oil extraction. So Jeremy Rifkin was saying that if we go beyond this environmental crisis and we make it as a society, as humankind, and in 300 years we look back at our generation, we will be the fossil fuel generation. And this is now so present in everybody's newspaper, because right now we're entering a war that many of us didn't decide to, but the energy crisis is at its max there, right? And it's going to affect everything. And it's going to affect food security as well, which is, when fuel prices and food prices go up, what happens is a lot of instability. So linking ourselves to fossil fuel is the biggest mistake we've ever made. Even if there wasn't any CO2 emissions associated to it, we will still have problems because we are linked to a non-renewable source. It's a finite resource, right? So if we go to the next slide, I want to introduce a little bit the concept of circular economy, because this is also one of those legacies that we left in the moment we live now. So we left all the pollution and the environmental crisis, and a big part of the environmental crisis is waste. We are the only animal that produces waste. In nature, never a single creature has ever produced waste. And yet we've produced so much that it's such a problem right now. We've polluted everything. So what circular economy is saying is like, let's look at nature. How does nature do it? In nature, everything is circular. We don't do extract, take, make, dispose as we're doing in our linear economy. In nature, everything is circular. So we could have two different cycles. One would be the biodegradable cycle, the one that nature uses. This can be really helpful for so many things that we're using right now that we need to clean before we throw. For example, we are throwing to landfill all of these organic waste that could become compost really easily, and yet we're throwing it to the landfill, and that creates 10% of the methane emissions worldwide. So there's a lot of issues associated to our disposal of things that could be so easily tackled. And the three principles of circular economy is that preserve the natural capital. If we extract less, we preserve it. If we can recirculate elements more in the cycles, also the technical cycle, let's say my washing machine is broken, why am I throwing it to a landfill? It's full of metals and precious valued items that we can use. So the second principle is optimize the resource yields, right? Like, why does a shampoo bottle that is made out of plastic last 400 years? That means like all of the shampoo you've ever used in your life, you could have reused that same bottle and still will be looking the same, right? So we haven't maximized the yields that we can do on our thing, and we haven't brought back to the biological and technical cycle everything that we are manufacturing and producing. And then we need to also consider externalities. So the principle 3 is to not ignore the externalities. Pollution, garbage, all of those are externalities that have now become a huge problem that we need to deal with. And before we literally ignore them, we didn't even put them in the equation of the economy of that business plan, right? So now it's time to restart doing all of this. Again, next slide, please, Marcin. The first time I ever heard about circular economy without those terms, it was in this book, Cradle to Cradle, and it was written by an architect. And it was really interesting because in architecture, we have a lot to do also with circular economy. So next slide, please, Martin. So buildings are, the largest sector emitter in the world, right? So you would think, oh, the planes, the transport. No, that's the number 3 sector. Or the second is food production, heavily linked to fossil fuels. In this new Ukraine crisis, it's really heavy. So why are buildings so pollutant? Because we do most of our activities in buildings. So they contribute to 40% of the energy use and 36% to CO2. But listen to this, fossil fuels is used to heat, and it accounts for 75% of our emissions. So this is really important. Why? Right now, Russia is not selling us gas. How are we going to heat our northern countries? How is Poland? Ukraine is almost gone, but how is Germany going to heat themselves? This is something that architecture needs to tackle heavily. 70%, 75% of the heating comes from fossil fuels. Next slide, please, Marcin. And construction also accounts for a huge load, which is raw materials. 50% of all the raw materials of the world come from to construction, and waste is 30%. And then you see like concrete, all of this embodied energy associated to all of these materials that are so bad. A kilo of concrete, before you use it in your project, it's already a kilo of CO2 emissions to the atmosphere. And China in 10 years used more concrete than the US in its whole history, just to give you some perspective of the numbers. Architecture is essential to target and lower the emissions from construction and for building performance. Next slide, please. Building performance refers to the operations of the building. So once it's built, so ignoring construction, then we have to see how much the building pollutes, and that you can see it very well in your energy bills, right? So something that new architecture needs to consider is the building envelope. How good is the coat that building is using? It's not the same to go with a wool cardigan than go with a Patagonia super high-tech coat when you go to the snow, right? It's the same for a building. The materials performance, the airflow, gravity, ground cover, shading, solar gain, all of that can be designed with building physics. We can design looking back at how they were designing 100 years ago when there was no climatization and HU units and energy for buildings, and take advantage of what we know, how materials perform, the sun, the orientation, the airflow. And then we need to select, and this is where technology comes in, really efficient MEP systems, heating systems, electrical systems, lighting systems, water fixtures. All of that needs to go into all of these buildings. Europe is old. We built long time ago. We need to retrofit. We need to retrofit these buildings. So I'm going to show you some samples now. Next slide. And if you look at the building performance numbers in the UE, you can see that 64% of the energy consumption goes in space heating, and 75% of that comes from fossil fuels. Huge emissions there, huge. Next slide. To achieve building performance, there's a lot of different systems now that are implemented. There's the green certifications. We have BREEAM, EDGE, LEED, Green Mark, Green Start. We have, the rating of how your building is performing. And then we have now a new concept which is called net zero, which only refers to the performance, so ignores completely the impact of construction, which you've seen a lot already. But what it's doing is you design a house to consume less. You design a building envelope, a facade that is really, really good. You design efficient MEP systems, and then you have to produce all the energy your building will consume on site, and also collect all the water that your building will consume on site. That means that you don't need to buy energy or water from elsewhere. The building is able to produce that for the occupants. So you need to treat water, recycle water, capture rainwater. You need to put solar panels. You need to make really efficient systems, heat pumps. All of that has to be done throughout all of Europe. The problem is, how are we going to finance that? So I'm going to show you an example in the next slide of how a company from the Netherlands is doing it. Can you pass the next slide, please, Marcin? This is a company called Energy Sprong. I haven't met them, but I saw what they were doing. In 10 days, they are starting with residential, but I know cities like New York and London are looking at it to do it in skyscrapers and higher buildings. What they basically do is they bring a new envelope, new coat. It's time for you to renovate your coat and buy Patagonia and not wool cardigan from your grandma. Get a better envelope. They put solar panels on the roof. They change the heating systems to heat pumps, which are exchange heaters, so they consume a lot less. And through those solar panels, you're able to power the whole house, including the electricity and including the heat pump for your hot water and your heating system. How do they finance this? They go to communities. You are paying every month your energy bill. So what they're telling you is like, we go to your community, we talk to banks of the area, we get sustainable loans, and I believe in this summit there'll be more discussion about that. And yet you'll still be paying your bills, your energy bills, back to us until you recover your whole investment. They are doing this in a lot of places, and it helps the communities, helps the environment, and it's a really good business model for the company. It has a really good return on investment. The next slide, please. If we talk about building constructions, there is so many emissions associated to it, but not only from building activity, but also from the manufacturing and producing of all of those materials, like I said, the cement. So, you know, when you talk net zero, you're ignoring that impact. Okay, we could say, okay, in Europe, we've built most of it, so the impact of new construction wouldn't be as much. But in many other places that are developing countries like China, India, Brazil, Indonesia, countries that are heavily populated, this is a huge impact. So the embodied energy is the energy associated to that manufacturing of those materials. So it includes all the processes, you know, the mining, manufacturing, the transport, and the product delivery. And construction and demolition waste counts for 30% of total. And only in the EU, there's only 4% recycled. So we have a huge thing to do, because we are supposed to bring in also this into the circular economy. This material should be able to be reused elsewhere. In the next slide, I'll show you a sample of companies that are considering this circular economy in the new materials. So if we can go to the next slide, please, Marcin. We have companies that are working on timber structure to avoid cement and concrete. Timber, you know, there's a lot of sustainable forests. They rotate the production of timber, so they cut and then they grow again. So those forests are called FSC forests. They are supposed to be sustainable wood. Right now, engineering is a lot heavier, so we are using laminated wood to do high skyscrapers. Right now, the biggest one, I think, is 30 stories in Norway. This building has a lot less embodied energy because you're using the sun to grow these trees. And then, yes, you're cutting them with a machine and then you're transporting them to site. But you don't need to go through any manufacturing process in between. And then this is another project that we're doing in Indonesia. It's a school, but it's brick blocks that were done in Finland through a Finnish company that are using 100% recycle from plastic. And they are building these brick blocks, which are, you know, perfect for, you build this school in 5 days. And it's really good thermally, it's really good structurally. We have to innovate a lot and reuse things to lower the impact of the construction as well. In the next slide, we can see that also technology is playing a huge part, especially in cities. Half the population lives in cities. That's where most of the economy happens. Technology comes with smart solutions, right? Where everything is connected. This is the technology 4.0. We can, you know, if we have a surplus of electricity production in a building because the roof is really big and they are producing a lot of electricity, but they don't consume, maybe that can charge my electrical car, and that can, you know, so at the end, what we're trying to do, not only on the net, on the electrical network, but also on the cities and in the buildings, we're trying to connect everything to sensors with the Internet of Things, and we're trying to optimize the performance of those buildings. And I think this is a huge thing, because we're going to be able to identify where are those leaks, where is there more consumption happening, and then address those issues. So this is really exciting. As you can see, architecture is full of opportunities and possibilities. The job is enormous. And to finish, I want to finish with my personal journey in the next slide. I was an architect already specialized in sustainability. I was working in Singapore as a sustainable consultant, but I always felt that I wasn't doing enough. I wanted to build a real circular, low impact, natural materials home. So I did that in Indonesia. This is my house. It's made out of bamboo. This is 10 years ago that I live now there. If you go to the next slide, you can see I applied everything that I learned in my master's. We did passive studies. Next slide, please. We collect rainwater. I treat all of my gray water. I reuse it for my toilets and irrigation. We have solar panels. We are completely net zero independent. We also have chickens and permaculture, and I make compost with all of our organic waste. This building, in the next slide, you can see when we were building, it's made out of pieces of bamboo. Bamboo is a material that in 4 years grows, so it's really sustainable. You only need the sun. You don't even need to irrigate it in this area of the world. It grows in 4 years. You cut it, you're inside.
Paula?
Building the construction was so little. So that's my personal experience. I live there. I'm looking forward to do one winter home in the US.
Sorry, Paula. Please consider that you need to close your.
Okay. Okay. I'm finished. 2 more slides. Next, right now, what I'm doing with architecture, I'm designing circular business models. I'm designing black solidify facilities. It's a circular business model. We get organic waste. We give it to these black solidify maggots. We make protein feed. We make compost. We feed plants. We feed chickens and cattle. And then all of that goes back into organic waste. Next slide. We are doing the same in Indonesia with circular business models in palm oil. How can we make palm oil zero waste? Someone needs to design these facilities. This is using insects. So I'm helping on that. And, you know, probably in the discussion, we'll talk more about this. But architects, huge role in the future, cannot ignore it. We have a lot of work to do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paula. I believe that it's incredible how you can wrap us with your passion about this topic. So thank you so much for that. Now, if you're interested in joining Paula Huerta in the discussion with Ernest Barcelo, Vice President of the Sustainability at OUYA, you can find it on the left side of your screen, okay? You will see that there is a title, Breakout Room Number 1. So just click over there and you will go to that room. The panel will take around 20 minutes. So after it, please come back here. We will be waiting for you with the next speakers, okay? Thank you, Paula.
Thank you.
So now we have a second speaker, that is Professor Hanjo Elainer, Managing Director of CAP2, with the topic, Are Net Zero Emission by 2050 Still Possible? Professor Elainer, I would like to give you the microphone now. So if you would like, yeah, now we can see you.
Hello.
I
hope
we can hear you well, but we cannot see you.
Okay.
Let's see.
Wait a second. this better now? No.
No, we cannot see you, but we can hear you well. So I believe that we can continue anyway if it is not working the camera, if it is okay for you, Professor.
Sure.
Okay, you would like to share your screen, right?
I'm right.
Okay, now you have the rights. You only need to click over there. Now we can see you. Great.
Hey, thank you for having me here. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Let me share the screen.
Remember, you will find the option in the middle of your screen, here below. Yeah.
Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect. Okay. Sorry for the small problems when entering the room here. I obviously have too many cameras around, so that I had to find the right one. Okay. So the question whether net zero emission by 2050 is still possible depends on many different aspects. Certainly, we have to keep in mind that there's a lot of technical issues, but me as an economist, I have to focus on other aspects, on the methodology as well. So this is why I want to introduce you on the role the European trading emission system plays in this context. Please keep in mind that more than 40% of European greenhouse gas emissions are subject to trade on the European trading emission scheme. So, in other words, it's more than 1.3 billion tons of carbons and carbon equivalents, which can only be emitted when companies buy a license, buy an allowance before. And that is a mandatory trade. So it's mandatory at least for something like 11,000 facilities in Europe. It's mandatory for all power plants. It's mandatory for aviation. It's mandatory for the energy-intensive industrial installations, and so on. The price for emitting 1 ton of carbon dioxide is currently €77 per ton. So it's not nothing. In other words, if today you want to emit 1 ton of carbon dioxide or equivalent gases, greenhouse gases, you have to buy an allowance in before. And this is checked annually in April. And if you cannot provide enough allowances for all the emissions you're responsible for, you have to pay a fine of €100 per ton. On top, you have to give proof of an allowance as soon as possible. So you need to buy the allowance and pay this €100 as a fine on top. Okay, my point is, we cannot ignore that huge sector. If 40% of all European greenhouse gases are subject to trade, we have to get a better understanding of how that works, because that is a key issue to reaching this 1.5 degree target. This is basically how it works. Fixed by law, by European law, we have a cap, an annual cap of emissions allowed. And this cap is lowered every year by 2.2%. So now, if company A, for instance, has lower emissions than company B, it can sell unused permits to company B. So what we do here is we do not interfere on an individual firm level, but we try to fix the overall emissions. We are lowering this cap from year to year, making sure that the overall emissions will be lowered. We do not care at all about whether it's company A emitting or company B. This is subject to the market. This is subject to the price. Because, well, a company which has lower costs in avoiding their emissions than buying the certificate will certainly avoid emissions. Right? You only buy these emission allowances when your marginal costs of avoidance are higher than the price of these allowances. Okay, now briefly, what economists like about the European ETS. By this, we make sure that only the number of tons in carbon dioxide or equivalent greenhouse gases are emitted where allowances are held for. And the second thing is that doing so, we reduce overall emissions in an efficient level, because it's always those firms to avoid that can do this most cheaply. See, whoever can avoid 1 ton of carbon dioxide for less than the price of the pollution right would do so. And it provides a reliable frame for companies to plan. It makes investments in climate protection to pay off, and we have very low costs of control, and it's adaptable. If we want to increase or to sharpen the mitigation path, if we want to reduce emissions by more, we could just easily adapt the system. Now, why should climate activists bother about EU ETS? This is a very key argument. So the point is the following. The European ETS is the legal framework within which any action takes place. And if you ignore that, your impact might be zero, although you actually try to do the very right thing. Let me give you an example for that. Suppose politicians decide to massively stimulate the expansion of photovoltaics for power generation in private households. They're willing to pay subsidies for that. As I said, the power plant sector, power generation, electricity generation, is by 100% subject to ETS, to European emissions trading. Now, what would happen if a household would install photovoltaic facilities on its roof? Well, as a result, the household would have to purchase less dirty electricity. The dirty electricity provider itself now needs to produce less electricity, and therefore it needs less emissions allowances, because it can't sell as much dirty electricity as before. But what happens now? As our former electricity provider does not need all the emission allowances he had to show the year before, he will now sell the unused emissions to any other party on the market, right? So they are not gone. We enable just another participant of the market to increase its emissions. So the overall effect would be zero. We have to keep this in mind, that if we do not carefully focus on this legal framework, we won't have a chance to get to the 1.5 degree target. The solution is pretty simple. Please do not get me wrong. I'm not stating that the EU ETS is the wrong instrument. I'm convinced it's a very powerful instrument. We just have to understand it better. So what politics should do is the following. To the same extent that they are trying to increase the photovoltaic facilities on private households, they would have to withdraw some of the emission rights from the European market. So if you reduce emissions to the same extent as you make green power possible, everything's perfect, and you would have a 100% impact on overall greenhouse gases. Now, what is it I do not like about the EU ETS? The point is that the 2.2 annual reduction rate is just not ambitious enough. If we want to reach the 1.5 degree target, we need a far higher cap than this. What I show you here is our own illustration of 40 different IPCC carbon dioxide mitigation paths that are compatible with a 1.5 degree target. you can just easily pull the raw data and play a bit around with that, and then you will get exactly to these slides here. But if you have a closer look on that, you see that every path, each of these paths has a higher mitigation rate, annual mitigation rate than just 2.2%. See how much we are reducing our emissions at the beginning here when we want to be compatible with one of these paths. This is the result of our calculations. Well, first I have to say it's no such thing as one right mitigation path. It's an infinitive number of mitigation paths thinkable and perceivable. The point is you have to stick to one, right? So sure, you could start at a very high reduction rate at the beginning and then lower it, or you start with a lower mitigation rate at the beginning and then you increase it. However, I cannot think of a mitigation path being compatible with a 1.5 degree target, which only reduces by 2.2% annually. So our calculation show something like at least 7%, which has to be the annual emission reduction to be on the way. So if you see the right here, which is the right graph, which is slightly confusing, this is the annual reduction in percentage points. So we start at 7%, but then we have to increase the reduction rate more and more. So here we are decreasing emissions by 15% already, however, on a lower base, right? And then after a turning point, the reduction rate can be increased, which does not mean that we can increase emissions. See, we are still below the 0% rate even here. So what needs to be done to get back on track? I'm convinced that the European ETS is a powerful instrument. It's one of the best systems provided in the world. We have several other markets for voluntary emission reduction markets, but the point is a voluntary market is cannot guarantee the impact. See, with this mandatory market, we can guarantee the outcome we plan to achieve. But to do this, we need to increase the reduction factor. And with the second point, I want to get back to what Paula Huerta was saying. We need to include the building sector and also maritime transports. The building sector, the construction sector, is a very, very important player, and so far it is not included in the mandatory trading system. So the third point is that we need to double the MSR intake rate. So MSR stands for Market Stability Reserve, and the Market Stability Reserve got into place in 2019, and it tries to fight the mistakes we did at the beginning of the European ETS when we had far too many certificates on the market, and the price for emitting 1 ton of carbon dioxide or equivalents has dropped to several cents. What the Market Stability Reserve does is that it takes away a certain percentage of the allowances out there in the market which are not used. So it's 24% currently of the difference between all issued allowances and all allowances demanded since the beginning of the market trade. And from 2024 on, this intake rate, this reduction rate, shall go down to 12%. And I'm convinced that it's absolutely necessary to keep it as high as it is to make sure that the European ETS is still working and prices continue to develop. So before the Russian before Russia started the war in Ukraine, the price was already higher than 90 euro. It just dropped in the last 3 weeks. But I'm pretty confident it will go up soon. So thank you very much. That was my short presentation.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for that amazing intervention. I think that is very important what you were telling us, to the audience, to us. I believe that this is not a conversation that we can just leave it here. Indeed, this is something that we need to get deeper into it. So I would like to invite now the audience to come with you to the breakout room. The breakout room will be the number second, the second one. You will find it on the left side of your screen. Okay. In your case, Andrea, to join that room, you need a link and a code that Marcin sent it to you. Okay, just check the chat.
Yeah.
Okay.
See you later. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that. Now, I would like to invite, as I told you before, to everyone that is in the audience to continue the discussion, not only with Andrew, but as well with Alistair Mullen, who is the head of the Rainforest Capital Markets Initiative. And remember that this is a panel that will take 20 minutes. And after that, you will be able to come back here and continue with the next speakers, okay? So now I would like to welcome our next great speaker, who is Oliver Warwick. He is the group leader at Fraunhofer in, I'm so sorry for the pronunciation, IOSV, who will be presenting today a very interesting hot topic about a blueprint for transforming the energy system. So Oliver, again, I'm sorry for my mispronunciation. The microphone is yours.
No problem. I know that's it's a tough abbreviation that we have, so no problem. Thanks for having me here. Hello, everyone. I want to talk about the blueprint for transforming the energy system now, more from a technical perspective. I hope you can see my presentation.
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Yeah. First of all, again, I'm looking at this problem more from a technical perspective, and there's no single solution. And with the diversity of solutions that the people have and that are developed, the resilience increases for the overall system. So, and it leads to further development. What we need for this architecture and for the transforming the energy system, we need basic rules and basic architecture agreements. And since I am a computer scientist, I'm looking at this more from a technical perspective. I was already introduced, my name is Oliver Warwick. I'm working at the Fraunhofer Institute of Optronic System Technologies and Image Exploitation. That's a long name. And I'm working at the Department of Cognitive Energy Systems. And I'm head of the group Energy Informatics. We are 18 people working on the development of energy management energy management systems. And that's exactly just to tell you what we do. We're using data, we're using smart meter data, do the replacement of missing and non plausible metered values in a very specific way, then collect further information from exogenous values that are needed for doing the forecast of consumption of warmth, cold, electricity, gas, do the forecast for feed in from PV and wind turbines, and use this forecast for holistic planning of available feed-in resources. Feed-in resources usually are bigger power plants, but we consider now even buildings, CHPs, and electric vehicles, and we need to get access to these new assets. As we heard before, even buildings are actually controllable asset. We are working in the field of energy management now for 20 years, so you can see we have gone through the whole process of the development of the energy system. What was my motivation to do this? Let me see. There should be the next slide available for you. Okay, that works. What motivates me now for 20 years to work on this target? We all know about the European targets, and I don't want to repeat them. It's just reducing CO2 emissions and so on. And the thing is, every expert is not getting tired to emphasize that we're not doing enough. And I'm asking always myself, what is the call to action for the citizens? What is the call to action for the consumer? How we are getting more and more afraid of the targets, they're getting more ambitious. But I as a normal consumer, how can I contribute to this change? Who has to act? We know the politicians, they have to set the targets, the rules, they have to set the laws. Industry has has to set the standards, has to develop best practices, and enterprises have to implement these rules. But what can I do? This is the motivation that I have. What solution can motivate the citizens in Europe to contribute to the great targets that we have in the EU? So, and how can I share my investment, my electric vehicle, my heat pump where I put my investment in? How can I share that to contribute to this target? How can I share my data, information that I have, to provide an efficient energy operation and without losing control over my data? This is a very important aspect. How can I contribute to the energy transition? That is the motivation that I have. That motivates me for the last years and will for the next. And now I come to the challenges that we have in the transmission in the energy system. Well, I guess you all know about the aspect of decentralization, but what does that mean for the energy system? I already said that we used to work on with bigger power plants, and now we are moving more and more to small plants, to small assets that we can control, meaning from big nuclear, coal, and gas to wind, PV, small gas turbines, CHPs, micro CHPs, storages, heat pumps, electric vehicles. We are moving from a TSO perspective, from a regional perspective, to the actual district view, because there are the consumers, and there are the sectors becoming there. That's the point where the sectors are getting together, and the problem that we need, the question that we have, with all this feed in from the district view, from the low voltage level, do we need to extend the grid to transport every kilowatt hour, or can I manage the grid, or can I manage the energy, to use the local energy also locally within the district? And that is a matter of cost. Yeah, to enhance the grid, for the grid extension, there are some numbers that circle around. The numbers differ between 27 billion and 50 billion just for Germany. I only have the numbers for Germany, I'm sorry. But what are the costs for energy management on the other side? And that depends on the company that is doing the energy management. There are no official information, but if you see the um, the, the, um, the graphic, or the picture that was that in the presentation, if we can achieve, because energy management has to be done anyway by every company on a utility level, on a more global level, and on the TSO level, on the medium voltage level. So if we can achieve that the energy management will be, or the cost will not increase anymore, then energy management will be cheaper, or will be a good part to decrease the cost for the grid extension. And in addition, energy management leads to, at least these are the numbers, and we already heard it from the speakers before, energy management leads to a reduction of the energy consumption within districts up to 30%. So in both cases, to reduce the consumption and to provide the ability to use local energy on a local level, we need the local energy management. What are the common functions of an energy management? Is there a difference between a local energy and management on a utility level? Well, general functions are mentioned here. We have data acquisition, preparation, and preparation. We have balancing. We have to aggregate every single kilowatt hour to the source of consumption and feed in. We have to do the forecasting. We have to do holistic planning of controllable resources, and we have to do the monitoring. The challenges for the local energy management are that we are not doing this, executing these functions 100 times. but 1,000 times. So what we need to scale up this function to reduce the cost, and this can only be done by getting more data and getting it automatically, and execute this function automatically. And the next problem is that on a local level, we have to integrate solutions from different vendors. We already know that there are local building management systems available from different vendors. We have to integrate these solutions that are already in place to access the local level, to access the assets that provide flexible resources for the energy management. And the problem of these already in place solutions is that most of them, they don't have any real energy management functions available. Most of them only using the data. So they have a lack of energy management functions like forecasting and like optimization. They have a lack of specialists for data science. So this is one of these challenges that we have in the energy transition. We need an open management system or open energy management system. We need open energy management functions with standardized interfaces to access the flexible resources in the districts and to control the flexible resources in the districts. To do this, I said it already, we need local data. Why? It becomes clear if you look at the forecasting. The statistics on the local level, they don't work very well anymore. So the forecast on a city level, for instance, is way better, talking about the quality of the forecast, than as a forecast on the district level. We have a higher dependency on individual events and on individual behavior. So we need further data to reduce this risk that will be created by having a bad forecast. And these data are coming from local weather, local traffic information, information about of local public events, for instance, or even personal information. Talking about the planning and scheduling of the resources, we have the problem that the ownership changes very often, more often than it does with big plans. That's also can be explained if I use a heat pump and I'm moving in and out of the house, so the ownership just changes, but the heat pump won't change. But the next owner has maybe other requirements to use this flexible resource, the heat pump as flexible resource. So we need this information as well. And of course, the monitoring, we need information about the monitoring of these small assets to see how they behave. And in addition, to make this a business case with this new information can even lead to new services and to new business cases that can be provided to the consumer at the district level. We're just talking about CO2 certificates. This is one thing, or the proof of origin of upstream and downstream services and products on a local level can be done with data. And again, I said it already in the beginning, on the local level, the consumer is connected over the different sectors, over the different sectors that needs to be managed. And you need the information from all these sectors on this level, as well as open APIs to get these information. Now that I've mentioned the challenges, I want to tell how we attack, or we try to attack, these challenges. And the first thing, of course, is the architecture, or to establish open data spaces. There is what are the requirements for open data spaces? The requirements are interoperability of data and services, portability, I'm sorry, of data and services so that can be moved around, sovereignty of data, very important, so that participants can retain absolute control and transparency of what happens to their data, and finally, security and trust. These are the requirements for an open data space, for an architecture that provides open data spaces, for an ecosystem, or open data ecosystem. And this is first reference architecture, or is provided by the Gaia X initiative. It's an initiative from the European Union as well, and it aims to create such an open data spaces as a federated open data infrastructure. And the mission of Gaia X is to design and implement a data sharing architecture of common standards for data sharing, best practices, tools, and governance mechanisms. And the Gaia X architecture identifies and describes the concepts of the federated open data infrastructure as well as the relationships among them. Let's go to the next slide. And how to use artificial intelligence to attack these challenges. That's what adds in the next question. AI can be used for the development of a cognitive energy management, meaning if you go for it will help to scale up all these functions by automation of data preparation, automation of forecasting, automation of planning and optimization. And with that, even not only the automation, but also the establishing of knowledge bases that are available to even implement a self-learning system, so that it's not automatically just integrating and executing these functions, but also to improve the functions or improve the quality of services through AI. And putting this all together, architecture and these functions, the solutions would be to build a digital ecosystem for cross-sectoral energy districts. We have the districts at the bottom level, the physical area at the bottom level. We have different available solutions at the building and smart home level, as I already said. And then we have the Gaia X infrastructure to exchange data between the physical layer and the application layer, and to provide services to the application layer, services meaning in this case the energy management services. And these services will be used in applications by the different stakeholders. And that leads me to my last slide, talking about the stakeholders. On the district level, several infrastructures are coming together at one point. I said that already. The consumer he has to answer the question who, or not the consumer, but the infrastructure, the stakeholders, they have to answer the question who can take control over these infrastructures, who can provide the service and needed to use my storage, that uses my heat pump, use my electric vehicle to increase energy efficiency. Who can provide this service? And this is just a proposal that we have. We are working on this. On one side, we need like a contract to define the physical infrastructure. That is the basic to define incentives to behave in a way that to prevent grid extensions, for instance. And with these incentives that are defined by the infrastructure operator, you have the chance to develop business cases and develop services as a energy operator, a district energy operator, to coordinate all the different suppliers of energy to provide a service to the end consumer. And with that, I close my cycle from my motivation and what we need from our perspectives as a blueprint for transforming the energy system. With that blueprint, it would be possible to provide these services so that I would share my heat pump, my electric vehicle to such a district energy operator to use it to help transform the energy system. Okay, as a sum up, we need to provide technologies to establish an architecture for open and interoperable data exchange, to keep data sovereignty at the data provider level, to realize an upscaling of energy management functions by the means of AI, by the use of AI, and to set up the right stakeholders to provide services that allow citizens to actively contribute to the energy transition. And we as the front of IOSB are offer our services in cooperation to work with you on these challenges. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Oliver. If you are interested in joining Oliver in the discussion with Dimitris Karamitsos, Senior Energy Efficiency Business Developer Specialist at Basel Agency for Sustainable Energy, and as well as Ian Padilla, CEO and co-founder of WeWack, you can find on the left side of your screen the breakout room number 3. Remember, the panel will take 20 minutes, and after that, you can come back to this main room. In your case, dear Oliver, please check your chat because Marcin sent you the link and the code to access to that room, okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Now, I would like to present you and introduce you to our second speaker. He's Sasha Giglione, CEO of My Computer, with the topic, how circular electronics changes the way we consume. Sasha, the microphone is yours.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Maria, for having me. I will be sharing my screen. Perfect. Did you know that the entire IT industry already today uses 10% of our global energy? And that the amount of e-waste that isn't actually recycled alone contributes to around 4.25% of the greenhouse gas emissions. My name is Sasha Giglione, and I'm going to show you how real circular electronics work and how we will need to change our behavior. We live in a time where there's a lot of opportunities and hope for all of us, but also immense challenges we face. But with great technology comes actually great responsibility. While I lived in New York around 13 years ago, I studied at Berkeley and worked for the UN. I firstly encountered there the climate change topics and was moved by the intensity of the needed change. We've seen so many changes within the last years. And I mean, if someone would have asked you 5 years ago, where do you see yourself in 5 years? No one really would have imagined where we are now. And therefore, everyone is part of the change. And this is the only constant we really have. So let's use this change for the greater good and the needed. I believe it is underestimated how much contribution the ICT industry has to both the global impact on change and actually the contribution to reducing waste and CO2 emissions. E-waste is indeed the fastest growing waste stream in the world, with around 53 million metric tons gathered in 2020. That's about the weight of 350 cruise ships. Incredible, right? So without more global action, experts actually predict that this number by 2030 will generate more than 74 million metric tons of e-waste every year. And only 17.8% is actually recycled. So the rest just lands on landfills. That's massive. A partner of ours recently shared with me this tremendous story and the pictures of these landfills, a visit he has done. And I must say I was deeply, deeply shocked. Seeing those children, boys and girls gathering our waste, it has not just incredible economical and ecological influence on us, but massive health risk for everyone involved. And let's see some facts and figures to that. If we take the fifth and recently shared circularity gap report as an example, you can see that the material extraction and use are climbing year over year. I mean, only 50 years, global use of materials nearly has quadrupled, actually outpacing the population growth. And in 1972, when the Club of Rome's report Limits to Growth happened or was published, the world consumed around 28.6 billion tons, and that number rose to 54.9 billion tons in 2000. As of 2019, it actually surpasses the 100 billion tons. Rising waste levels are indeed accompanying the rapid acceleration of consumption. Ultimately, over 90% of all material extracted and used are wasted. Or if we put it on the flip side, only 8.6% make it back to our economy. And it's actually getting worse. In only 2 years, global circularity wilted from 9.1% in 2018 to actually 8.6% in 2020. And at this rate of extraction, when this continues to sweat, this will threaten the planet's future and our lives on it. So we forecast, all the forecasts actually paint a grim future for us. And according to the International Resource Panel, material use may increase to between 170 and 184 billion tons in 2050 if businesses as usual prevails. So what is the problem? Yeah, why? It is the linear economy. While the linear economy has generated substantial economic growth and wealth and material wealth since the Industrial Revolution, this underlying model is flawed, unsustainable, and will ultimately collapse in the near future. We need to quit this take, make, waste behavior, which we have been fed for so long. Look, I still remember the times when something broke. Who hadn't had a cassette deck or cassettes that's broken once or twice, and even taken the pen and rewinding it and rolling back the cassette deck before injecting it? We were used to engage it, to repair it, to fix it, use it longer, give it another life. If you look on the hardware perspective, if you use an IT hardware for 5 years instead of 3 years, the overall environmental footprint of this device is just reduced by 40%. So yes, everybody can do something, and it's upon us and behavioral change as well. So let's look on a circular economy perspective. My colleagues already today have talked about that and the needed shift to that, because circularity gives us the tools to transform from a linear economy into one where waste and pollution are eliminated, ultimately. Products and materials are reused and nature is regenerated. If we integrate circular strategies in our economies based on the 4 flaws I'm going to show you, we will ultimately require fewer materials and emissions to actually live with. So first, use less. Minimize overall material inputs into the economy. Simple as that. We need to use longer. We need to extend lifetime, function lifetime and the resources of it. We need to make it clean. Means in using regenerative resources, the emissions in fossil fuels and the unsustainable biomasses need to be cut from the economy ultimately. And of course, we need to use again. This means designing for recyclability, both on technical but also on the biological aspect. Designing for a disassembly, for recycling, waste to energy, such things. The idea of the circular economy is inspired by ecosystems, where waste for one system is food for the other one. The typical path of the product life cycle is divided into 3 phases: before use, use, and post-use. So if you look on that graph, the pre-use within that graph on the left side concerns the steps where there's manufacturing, assembly, retail, that adds value to the product during its conception, before it actually reaches the end user. Then the product is in use, where it answers the user's needs. But then after its usage, the so-called post-use, it loses value due to the time and the usage. At this stage, the value is retained, and thanks to the processes such as I mentioned, reuse, refurbishing, remanufacturing, and the recycling part, we can enable it to put it back a product to use. If you look on challenges that we always have in any aspect, there's one huge challenge, of course, given the global and complex nature of electronic supply chain, as you can imagine, intensively even the last 3 years, a coalition of the willing is needed across actually all companies, value chain steps, and sectors to establish a real circular economy. I picked out a few challenges to show you in a simple way. No financial incentives. So currently there are not a lot to be considered, as no real legislations or environmental laws that makes it easier to actually go there. One big issue is that the virgin material is still cheaper than the recycled material. It should be allowed for us that doing the good thing should be cheaper than doing the expensive thing. The misperception. There could be a misperception that used product is seen as inferior as new products, which is often not the case. If you look on the remanufacturing part, it's as new and with guarantee. Also, the product and end life is not really considered when you are designing it. So it still goes in landfill waste, recycling, etc. It's not really considered. One big issue is the component standardization. Means they're often all different and not always compatible. If you look on the big, it was just one simple explanation. If you look on the big phone manufacturers, we still have not one unique charger. This should be actually simple to put an incentive or legislation that we all use the same charger. This will minimize a lot. Then comes the e-waste part, where there's a lot of hazardous substances leakage, right? Or local ecosystem pollution, including soil, air, human health. Those might be challenges we face in there. Let me give you an example how we at Prime Computer go into the circular electronics. At Prime Computer, we design for circularity. From the instant of the thought, we put all into there. So meaning longevity, modularity, reuse, recycled parts and sources, energy efficiency, upgradability. I mean, our products use up to 80% less energy and come with a 5-year warranty because we actually build for quality. We source from local suppliers where we can. We set ourselves high targets for remanufacturing or resource recovery. That actually means to use waste as a resource. We develop tools for our customers to calculate the energy and CO2 savings, and offering easy upgrade modular solutions as well as a product as a service model. So if you're looking on the post-use, the circular post-use solution, there's the end of life and the reverse logistic part. So second life program, the easy to disassemble part and sort the elements. The players that act early can ultimately be better positioned in tomorrow's circular markets. But one thing is sure, it needs to be anchored, as we show there in the graph, within the company culture itself. Sustainability culture, where every stakeholder is driven by the positive purpose of change in sustainability. So, for instance, what we do here also is we align people bonuses on our sustainability goals. If you look on how we will consume, what will change? Aside from actually integrating circularity into actions of businesses, cities, nations, people, high-level change must be enacted to create the enabling conditions for a more circular world. We must utilize data-driven tools. My predecessor had a great speech about that. We must utilize data-driven tools to bring circularity to everyone. We need to use then the metrics to track the transition and apply a social lens to the transition to actually ensure that no one is left behind. The holistic point of view. And we will see in the upcoming years trends into service devices. So we know that obviously since several years in the software space, and this will enter in the hardware space as well, not really owning them, and not just for the sake of being able to repair it, remanufacture it, and therefore also reduce the global greenhouse gas emissions, but also to limit the billions of tons of virgin materials that are used. There's a world of opportunity, right? A world of opportunity to be unlocked by rethinking and redesigning the way we produce and consume our goods. We call it the rethinking progress. And this explores how, through a change in perspective, we can redesign the way our economy actually works through designing and manufacturing products that are made to be made again. and not aiming to sell a lot of the same goods to break down so that people need to buy it. And those systems obviously need to be powered by with renewable energy that it is kept as long as possible in the system. Look, everybody's in the change process, right? I explained that before, but we need to make sure it's fair, it's truly sustainable, and not just, again, another brand just sells you the marketing green label and net zero by 2050. We do not have endless resources, and we do not have time. And neither should we actually, because circularity benefits all stakeholders, right? The nature, the economy, and you. It's important for us to keep up the good news as well. We always hear news how bad everything is and how humanity gonna destroy the world, etc. But there's so many great news and solutions out there, and the potential not just on being more sustainable, but also to shift the money into the right direction and making money. To that, there's a great sector later on in the day also. The greatest entrepreneurs of this decade are actually going to be out of the clean tech sector, those creating solutions and businesses to help resolve the climate disasters we are in. But we also have to do and to share our passion, to guide them towards a circular path. There's no way around that. And based on the Circularity Gap report, the circular economy alone can cut greenhouse gas emissions by 39% if enacted on a global scale. The innovation cannot just come from the companies, from us. It's all of us. And it's in your hands as well. So let's do the right thing. Have passionate about the impact of positive change and what we really can do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sasha. I wanted to explain you that Marcin sent you the link and as well the code to enter the breakout room. And I would like to remind as well the audience that if you are interested in joining Sasha in the discussion with Gilbert Hilkins, longer sites, you can find it on the right side of the screen. Okay? So you will be able to join that breakout room. That is the number 4.
Thank you very much.
And remember that you can join us back, okay? After that. Now, I would like to introduce to Jörg Tucker, who is the CEO of Go Blue now, and he's the chairman of the Climate Action Alliance. You were here with us at the beginning, Jörg. So again, I would like to give you the microphone.
Thank you very much, Maria. Can you quickly confirm that you can hear me and see my screen?
Yes, we can. Yes.
Perfect. So yeah, thanks for being here. You said I was here in the beginning. Now I'm here in the middle, and I can tell you that I will be quickly here also in the end. But let's focus on my presentation right now. I'm talking about credible climate action for small, medium enterprises from plan to action. That's my topic. And I can tell you that this session is not so much about the why and what of credible climate action, because that is sometimes a little bit obvious. It's more about the how, because you really need to do it in specific ways in order to be able to distinguish credible from phony climate action, to say it with J.D. Salinger's famous words from The Catcher in the Rye. And more importantly, to enable you to start with credible climate action yourself from a company perspective. If I've achieved that, I'm very happy. I will be talking about these topics, and you will, from time to time, hear me saying or make a reference to science, or say the words transparent and credible. All these are crucial for achieving credibility in climate action. And yeah, I will mention these words a lot. And obviously, I will not be able to dive deep into all aspects of these topics because those are broad topics. So please join me in panel room number 5 after my presentation, because there you will be able to ask questions and you will be able to hear additional insights. So just 2 why slides to start with. Global warming is happening, and this is clearly confirmed by science. And sometimes I still hear the argument, well, science is disagreeing with each other. And that's the reason why I put the left slide here, the left graphic on the slide. Here you can see what disagreement looks like. You can see a very clear curve, pretty steeply rising. And you see some micro curves, and those are the different opinions of different science. So the level of disagreement is very, very small, and the agreed confirmation of global warming is pretty clear to see. On the right side, and that's an aspect I would quickly like to mention, global warming is not a linear process where we can maybe continue for some time, invest or invent great technology, and then in 20 or 30 years, take all the carbon out of the atmosphere. That will not work. And one reason is that there are tipping points. And one of these tipping points is the melting of the ice shelf, because that has an acceleration in itself. So if the ice melts on the top, it reduces its height, obviously. It gets to lower level, and whoever is sometimes doing some activities in the Alps knows that lower level typically means warmer temperature. So that accelerates the melting of the then highest area, which increases the acceleration. And in addition, when ice melts, it turns to water. Ice reflects sunlight, which has a little bit decreasing effect, but water absorbs the sunlight. So another acceleration inherent. That's what science means by tipping points. And unless we get back to ice age temperatures, which we are not very likely to do, this is a system which cannot be broken. So it's not a linear process. There are several of those tipping points, and we really need to act now. We cannot wait and defer our action. If you are of the opinion, well, that is then more water in the ocean and some small islands are suffering, think twice. It's very relevant to business in Europe, to business in Germany. If you look at the fact that you already see disruptions in your supply chains, you have breakdowns of your production sites already very observable. There is scarcity of raw materials. We have been suffering for that several times already in Germany, in the 5th largest economy of the world. And prices are increasing. It's very well observable now due to the fact of a brutal war, but the climate crisis, the climate catastrophe will have similar aspects. Be aware of that and join me in action. So some basics as seen on this overall approach, which are, as I said before, pretty obvious. You should start with a carbon footprint. You need to understand the footprint of your own organization in order to understand what is the amount of carbon being put in the air and by what. And then you can define climate targets and a credible reduction plan before you then start talking about that and convincing your stakeholders like customers, employees, investors, etc. And then this cycle repeats. It's not a linear process. It's not a one-time exercise. As I said before, this is pretty obvious. I talk to many organizations who claim, well, we do kind of that already. The key is in the what, in the how, sorry, not in the what, in the how you do that. There are, for example, standards related to each of those steps. The greenhouse gas protocol is one of the important standards related to developing footprints. which defines on a detailed level processes, emission factors, etc. For defining climate targets, there is, for example, CDP as an important international initiative, and the Science-Based Targets Initiative, which defines best practices to develop action plans, and first of all targets and then action plans, in order to be in line. And it differentiates even between in line with the 1.5 degree target or the 2 degree target. So there are options for you to choose from. Then there is the United Nations with a lot of initiatives and procedures and time and frameworks. And by the way, you heard him, Miguel Naranjo, speaking already in the beginning. He is also joining the panel section immediately after this speech. So he is the program lead for the Climate Neutral Now initiative. So first-hand information available immediately after this presentation from him. And then we have frameworks or structures like the Global Reporting Initiative, or the SDGs, you all know them. And they are very well able to be used in communication as structuring guidelines, or also to define certain ambition levels. And last but not least, you can, if you yourself are sure you make right use of these standards, you can have that checked, these approaches. So for example, by organizations like the TÜV or the EUTech, they provide certifications about the correctness about the validity, or let's say it with these words, about the credibility of your approaches. There is a big but, and I will be talking about the but on 2 or 3 slides further. So to give you an example about how a tool could look like, or that's more a framework than a tool, a good starting point, as I mentioned, is the carbon footprint. And you see that contains a lot of complexity. So scope 1 and scope 2, those are 2 things which are rather straightforward. Scope 1, your direct emissions. Scope 2, your indirect emissions. But if you turn towards scope 3, there are 15 sections broken down, including your supply chain, which contain a lot of complexity. But unfortunately, these scope 3 emissions for many, many organizations and industries make more than 80 or even 90% of your emissions. And I also have examples, even big companies leave them out right now. It might be a good start to start with something we at Global Now call scope 2.5, which limits the complexity for the first year of scope 3. That's scope 3. That's why we call it scope 2.5, and exclude your supply chain, include most of the other stuff. But you should definitely, after that, after a fast and effective start for your organization, turn then towards the full scope 3 emissions and include your supply chain and get the whole picture. So climate targets. I talked already a little bit about it. Well, the world's global budget will be used shortly. We still have to use something like 40 gigatons of carbon per year for a 1.5 degree scenario based on constant emissions. Well, constant, we all want to improve, that's nice, but in reality, we're even getting worse. And when I say we, I mean Germany. So Germany was improving in the year 2020 based on the pandemics, but almost or more than half of that positive effect has been already lost in the year 21. That's not a good idea. So we need to define ambitious targets, and the SBTI initiative suggests that we have to at least save 2.5% per year on an average to be in line with 2 degrees. And we have heard Hanno Allinger saying before, it needs to be more than 2.2%. Well, in order to be close to 1.5 degree, it should be 4.2%. Those are the kind of ambitions we should think about. And be aware of buzzwords, very popular buzzwords like climate neutral, net zero, because there also are defined by the Science Based Targets Initiative clear guidelines when a company really is net zero. And they are really required when you use these words. In order to be net zero, a company should save 95% of its emissions over time. You have to define an aggressive target of 50% cuts by 2030 already. And by 2050, you have to produce close to net zero. No net zero claims should be made before you have reached that point. So if you hear companies talking about net zero right now, ask those questions. As an overall approach, and there is no way beyond really reducing. You should put the reduction, your real reduction of your emissions at the center of your strategy. You can add, if you like, compensation or neutralization, which might help you accelerate your own performance, reduction performance. But don't rely only on compensation or neutralization. Compensation is not sufficient. We simply have not enough resources on the world to achieve our targets by only compensation. And neutralization is risky because it requires technological solutions which are not really fully available. And it inherits the risk of thinking like, well, we can neutralize later and we can act like we did the last 30 years. And that's obviously not the kind of thinking we need here. This is an example very quickly how a reduction plan should look like. And this is really an example. Those are what I typically call low-hanging fruit measures. But important is define your specific list and of actions for your organization. You can structure it by scopes, you can add KPIs, you can add time frames, and then really start acting on it. And this is a short, probably will have 25, 30 actions if it's an effective list. Last but not least, you can start communicating about what you do. There are different means of communication. You can, in the simplest way, you can use, for example, climate certificates, which certify what you have done, and you can use them in social media, even in the signature of the emails. Or you can write, which talks about the impacts you do in ecological, social, and governmental aspects. And you can address these reports to your target groups, to your stakeholder groups, like I mentioned before, customers, employees, future employees, investors. It's a good idea to have that, of course, only if you act like that. And that will be rewarded. For example, Generation Z consumers, they prefer to buy from sustainable brands, at least 62%. They really do. And they are willing to pay 10% more for sustainable products. And similar numbers you have for future employments. So these guys, they look for companies as potential employer who act in a sustainable way. The big but I was mentioning before. Many companies, they claim, and that is the left big red bar, what they all do related to climate action. But there are companies like the Corporate Climate Responsibility Monitor, who in a very recent study found and investigated and invested a lot of effort that these companies, and those are the 25 largest companies of the world, including Apple, Google, Deutsche Telekom, Mercedes-Benz, BMW, Volkswagen, you name it, really very big companies. Their action actually covers only a small fraction of what they claim. And from the beginning on, their targets fell well short of the required ambition. So even the target is not enough, by far not enough, to be in line with the 1.5 degree target. And to make it even worse, they extend substantial parts of their emissions, which should include scope 3, as I mentioned before, which is in many cases simply not part of their action. So, having said that, and coming to the end, this is my last slide. What does it mean for you? What can you do next Monday? And hopefully you all have an understanding that it should be related to understanding your footprint, defining smart targets and a credible action plan. You should talk about it with ESG reports. You should network. You should convince others. You can join forces. You should, or you could, think about getting support from professional climate consulting companies, like, for example, GoGlo Now, because you will, in the end, save time, you will save money, you will be faster, you will be closer to the 1.5 degree. And yeah, why not convince others? I think that's also an important action. You don't have to wait till Monday. You also can right now join, and I mentioned that before, the Climate Action Panel, which starts in room 5. You could check our GoGlo Now company card, because we don't only have a summit, we also have an exposition with more than 200 companies sharing their company cards, with the possibility to arrange calls and meetings. Of course, you can also all the time visit the GoGlo Now website and arrange a video call. Having said that, thank you very much for being here, for listening to me. And handing back to you, Maria.
Thank you so much, Georg. I would like to remind the audience that if you are interested in joining Georg in the discussion with Peter Cooley, founder of 12 Years and Resourcers, and as well Miguel Naranjo, Program Officer in the United Nations Climate Action Secretariat, you can find on the right side of your screen the breakout room number 5. The panel will be taking around 20 minutes. Again, remember that you can always come back to the main room. We will be waiting for you. So now I would like to introduce to you to our second speaker, who is Alexandra Lebert. She's the lecturer at ODIS, and she's going to be talking about how to educate to identify greenwashing. Alexandra, the microphone is yours if you would like to say hello and start your presentation.
Hello, can I just do a quick check, and can you hear me perfectly?
Yes, we can.
Okay, and let me share the screen.
It's loading. Now we can see it.
You can see the screen, great. Well, what you can read here, Patrick Steensens, he's the CEO of a company called Tech Data. They're a global tech company. And he's proudly saying on the website that he has created a climate parliament in which his employees voluntarily participate to bring his organization to net zero, and that environmental awareness should be ingrained in the DNA of its company. Well, you've probably seen more of these statements, but I promise you that by the end of this presentation, you will be able to have an opinion for yourself